In Great Britain, driving lessons have increased in price dramatically over the last 4 years. But when you compare them to inflation and average wages, are they actually more expensive than they were in January 2020? January 2020, and the average lesson price is £28.47, and the average weekly regular pay according to the Office of National Statistics is £512. Then something happened. We had lockdowns, and there was a period of 9 months, not all in one go, but on and off over 3 national lockdowns, where driving tests did not happen. And as a result, approximately 550,000 people who would usually pass their test on average over that period didn't pass and still needed an instructor. And the number of instructors declined. You can see that on the driving instructor register, but it doesn't actually show you the true story because more people left than the register suggests. Because if a driving instructor decides not to be a driving instructor anymore, there's no benefit to them. There's nothing in it for them to give back their badge. So they'll hang on to their badge just in case they want to do lessons again until the badge expires, and then they won't bother renewing it. So that register doesn't actually show the true reflection of how many lesson instructors there were. But I can say from my own view, lots of instructors did leave in that period. Lots did not come back after the lockdowns. So we had less instructors and a lot more demand. People who would have passed haven't passed because they haven't been doing tests, and all the people who would have started lessons are queuing up waiting to start lessons. Prices go up. So June 2021, this is after the market has had time to adjust. Tests and lessons have been back on for a couple of months now. Instructors have realised how much more demand there is and how much less instructors there are, and they put their prices up to reflect the number of inquiries they're getting. Average lesson price, £32.74. That's a 15% increase over 2020, a massive jump in a year and a half. And the average weekly pay according to the ONS, Office of National Statistics, is £541. That's a 5.6% increase. So, before lockdowns and after lockdowns. Driving lesson prices went up by 15%. Average wages went up by 5.6%. And if you're interested, inflation, RPI inflation went up by 4.6%. So wages actually beat inflation in that time. But driving lessons were significantly more expensive compared to wages and inflation than they were in January 2020. I'm now going to compare January 2020 with November 23. The reason why I'm using November 23 is simply because that's the latest month I have figures for. And the reason why I'm still starting in January 2020 is because I want the start position to be the same. I've seen that from January 20 to June 21, driving lesson prices increased significantly faster than wages or inflation. But if we go further along that timeline now to November 23, has wages, average wages and inflation caught up? Well, let's see. I've got figures here. So, average driving lesson price in November 23, £36. Unfortunately, that wasn't from that survey of 4,000 instructors because that survey doesn't exist for that month. I had to do this research myself, and as far as I can tell, that's the average driving lesson price in Great Britain. According to the Office of National Statistics, average weekly regular pay is £623 in November 23. So what we've got then is between Jan 2020 and November 23, driving lesson prices went up by 26.5% and wages went up by 21.6%. So driving lesson prices have still gone up faster overall than wages, but wages have been catching up. So from Jan 20 to June 21, driving lesson prices went whoosh really high and wages went up a bit but nowhere near as much. But from June 21 to November 23, driving lesson prices have continued to increase, but wages have been catching up, and they've actually halved the percentage point gap. If you're looking at it on a graph, it's half that gap between the two. But what really blew my mind is RPI inflation. From Jan 20 to November 23, inflation was 29.8%. And that's beat wages and driving lesson prices. So compared to wages, yes, driving lessons are still more in November 23 than they were in January 2020. But compared to RPI inflation, they're actually 3.3 percentage points lower. What about the long-term price of driving lessons? What are they going to be like in the future? How much are they usually? Well, in my experience, driving lesson prices are usually about 3 times that of the minimum wage. This is not how I dictate my own prices, but that's just what I've noticed over 20 years of observing driving lesson prices. 2004, when I was learning to drive, minimum wage was £4.85. Times that by 3, that's £14.55. In 2004, you could easily get driving lessons for £15 per hour. 2010, minimum wage, £15.93. Times that by 3, £17.79. In 2010, I was charging £18 an hour, so it's about 3 times minimum wage. I wasn't an expensive driving instructor, but I wasn't the cheapest either. I was quite new back then, so I was competitive on price. But usually lessons were at tops back then about £20 an hour from memory in 2010. 2020, prices of lessons were a little bit more. So minimum wage was £8.72, times that by 3, that's £26.16. And the average driving lesson price was £28.47, so a little bit more than 3 times. And in 2023, minimum wage £10.42, times that by 3, that's £31.26. Lesson prices on average at the moment are £36. So yes, lessons are more expensive than wages at the moment, or should I say lessons have increased more than wages have increased at the moment. Not more expensive, it's increased more, as we know, but I think wages are catching up. And where do I think it's going to get to? Where do I think it's going to settle down at? Well, probably about 3 times minimum wage. And minimum wage is going up this year as well. I think it's going up by £1 an hour. I don't know the exact number. I'll put what minimum wage will be on screen when it goes up in 2024. And the reason why wages are catching up, and that's because there's more supply now. There's more driving instructors. Many driving instructors left over the lockdowns. But prices went up, and that attracted loads of people to this industry. They're like, oh, you're getting more money, let's become a driving instructor. Now there are more people on the driving instructor register than there has been since 2015. So there's not really a shortage of driving instructors anymore. And as that backlog of pupils wanting to do lessons and learn to drive, as they start to diminish, and you get your normal supply, or should I say demand, because they're the demand. Supply for me, supply of pupils for the instructor, but they're the demand. As demand normalises and supply is probably a bit more than usual, that's going to put pressure on prices, and wages are going to catch up, in my opinion. I might be wrong, something could happen. I didn't know the lockdowns were going to happen, but that's what I think is going to happen. I don't think prices are going to come down. I think they're going to stay relatively similar, maybe go up a bit, but wages are going to catch up. Ever since I entered this industry, and I started training for it in 2008, ever since then, I've heard from other instructors that there are too many instructors undercharging. They're not charging enough. They're bringing the industry down. Because of them, I can't put my prices up as much. That's just how the market works. How much a driving lesson costs is related to the minimum amount of money a driving instructor is willing to accept to do the job. Many instructors say, but Plumbers earn more. Electricians earn more. They're self-employed. We should be earning as much as them. Well, a plumber's minimum amount of money they're willing to accept to do the job is higher than that of a driving instructor, and proof is in the pudding, because yes, they do charge more. And I've actually worked in the heating and air conditioning industry, so I have an idea about it. I wasn't a plumber, but I worked in the office amongst many plumbers, or they were called heating engineers and fitters. And their job to me seemed harder, and sometimes I had to go out and help them. And I remember one occasion over Christmas, we were a bit short-staffed, and I had to go to a crematorium in Colchester and rebuild this 4-inch gas pipe work with these really heavy tools. I think they were called Stilsons. It was freezing cold, there was snow on the floor. I was inside and outside, and in this room I was in, there was these washing machines with these balls in them. I wish I never asked what those balls in the washing machines were for, because the place was spooky enough. Every day I went home after working, doing that full day's work, I was knackered, exhausted. My minimum money I'd be willing to accept to do that job is higher than this job. And that is how it works. And supply and demand. So supply is that, how willing are people to do the job, and then demand is, well, how many customers there are. And it's been proven over the pandemic. Demand went up, supply, the number of instructors, went down. Prices went up. What happened? People were like, wow, look how much money the driving instructors are earning, because wages of instructors went up much quicker than wages of most other industries. So loads of people came into the industry, and as a result now things are starting to level off, and the average wage is catching up with that of driving lessons. I think it will return to being about 3 times that of minimum wage, simply because that is what it historically has been. What I don't think is going to happen, what I hope does not happen, is that driving instructors become this cartel and set a minimum price for lessons so everyone has to pay it, and if someone wants lessons they've got no choice but to pay that. That's not going to work, because it's not legal, and you'll have someone come in and go, you know what, they're charging that, I'm willing to do it for less, I'll go into the industry, undercut them, and there we go, take their business. Therefore that would force that cartel to reduce their price. And how are the cartel going to enforce it? They can't do anything legal, there's no legal thing there. They would have to be shady, dodgy. I hope that never happens. I don't think that will ever happen. Well, I hope you found this video interesting. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're looking for car insurance, check out the links to Collingwood and Confused in the description. If you're learning to drive and want to insure yourself on somebody else's car, then Collingwood are there for you, because you can do so without affecting the owner's policy, and that takes away a big stress from the owner of that car. Via the link at the moment, there's up to 35% off and a £20 Amazon gift card. If you want to insure your own car, I recommend checking out the link to confused.com, because you fill out one quote form and get loads of quotes back from many insurers to compare who's cheapest. And you can change your car on that quote as many times as you like without having to do the whole quote. You just change the car and recalculate. It's a really quick and easy way to compare how much it costs to insure different cars. Using the links doesn't cost you anything, but it does support the channel, so thank you very much. Subscribe to get my future videos, and until the next one, cheerio.